Here this time with Deputy Roisin Shortall.
So is that agreed?
Is that agreed?
Yeah. Thanks, Cahirlock. And initially, yeah, thanks, Cahirlock. And you might tell me when I've done about 8 or 9. Yeah, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in the bill today. Like many deputies, Minister, and like yourself, I think, I've received a lot of letters and emails, and indeed delegations have come to meet me, specifically on the matter of the implication of Section 34 of the bill on the Irish Aviation General Employees Superannuation Scheme. It has to be said there is grave concern and anxiety among many of my constituents about the effects that Section 34 will have, particularly on the deferred members, Cahirlock, of this particular superannuation scheme. Generally, let me say at the outset that I welcome the majority of provisions in the bill in creating the Shannon Group. It will involve obviously creating an overall umbrella group with responsibility for Shannon Airport and the lands around it and the other companies operating there, following the report of the Shannon Aviation Business Development Task Force of November 2012, and of course the separation of Shannon from Dublin. I think it's fair to say that people who represent Dublin, we've no problem with Cork. Also, I think receiving its independence in this regard, or of Cork being included in any name, because I think these 3 international airports are indeed Knock as well, are vital for the future development of our country. Section 6, of course, permits the creation of the new Shannon Group, and Section 10 outlines the functions. It has to be said, of course, that Shannon Airport and the Midwest generally have suffered enormously in the economic crash from 2008, with a huge decline in passenger numbers at the airport itself. Thankfully, I note, though, from the recent annual report, the 2013 report, a slight recovery with an increase in passenger numbers, and hopefully the provisions of this bill will build on that improvement. I also notice some restructuring has already taken place at Shannon, with the Shannon Airport Authority plc having taken over the management over the last year and a half. Chairperson, I think Rose Hynes, has indicated in the 2013 annual report that there is a positive future outlook for Shannon based on the improvements that have taken place in passenger numbers and in business at the airport recently. It has to be said, of course, Minister, that perhaps an over-reliance on military stopovers over the past 10 or 12 years provided short-term gains, but of course was unsustainable. And Ireland's role, of course, in US military stopovers, and we might remember Cahirlock constantly questioning Taoiseach Ahern about these matters when he was over in that seat. But Ireland's role in the US military stopovers, of course, at Shannon were damaging, I think, on balance to far and away to the reputation of our country. And over the years, I've strongly supported the distinguished activist Roger Cole and the Peace and Neutrality Alliance organisation in their brave stand against the militarisation of Shannon. SVADCO, of course, the Shannon Free Airport Development Company, it was a very successful, innovative company, I think, in the economic development of our country. And I note the new CEO in place, Neil Packey, is developing new structures and also improving the management of the airport and the associated companies. I know there's been a recent increase in the number of routes from Shannon, including provision of a range of new routes by Ryanair, and that Aer Lingus is also extending its services from Shannon with new routes to Bristol, Malaga, and increase in the Manchester and Birmingham routes. And United, of course, are also planning to increase capacity. Shannon, of course, was always a standard bearer in the avionics and aviation engineering area, and indeed in aircraft leasing and financing. And of course, again, there's huge potential, I think, to develop these industries further in parallel, of course, with developments at the Dublin Airport region. So I therefore welcome Part 8, which provides the final step in giving effect to Article 11, Alternative A of the Aircraft Protocol to the Cape Town Convention, which I think the Minister told us means we will replicate the 60-day waiting period for creditors, which is the general modus operandi in the United States. I also particularly welcome the inclusion of the dazzling travelling offence, if you could call it that, in Section 44, Minister. I note you said this morning that there were 281 reports of lasers being shot at our aircraft in 2013, with 60% of these taking place in Irish airspace. And I remember when I was transport spokesperson for the Labour Party, this is a complaint that we received in the vicinity of Dublin Airport on a number of occasions. It's a very serious crime, of course, and a potential disaster for crews and passengers. So at long last, it's good that it's included here. I note also you've given traffic management powers to the airports, which are probably long overdue as well. And finally, in Part 9, you've contained amendments to update the laws concerning tour operators. You seem to be saying, though, Minister, that we're not able to defend our 1982 Act. In other words, that EU operators, travel operators, can come here and operate very freely without licence, etc., etc., based on that reasoned opinion you got from Europe. But perhaps you might indicate in your reply how, in fact, if any, you could again protect us, protect Irish customers in relation to foreign travel companies, foreign airlines, which are so extensively used here. But I'm very concerned, Cathaoirleach, about this one section, the contents of the bill, which relate to the IASS. New Section 32 of the Air Navigation and Transport Amendment Act 1998, as amended, does seem to give large powers to trustees and companies, and comparatively, at the same time, remove powers from members and deferred members. Deferred members of the IAS, I think, they're, as you know, Minister, particularly concerned about the provision, and I understand there are nearly 15,000 people who are involved, with approximately a third active current members, a third pensioners, and a third deferred pensioners. And you also told us earlier that members work or worked for Aer Lingus nearly 70%, DAA, SAA 26%, and SRT, I think, 5%. The current pension concerns, of course, relate also to the trauma that was suffered, I suppose, by workers at SR Technics a number of years ago when it was closed. That closure, of course, was totally unnecessary and stupid, carried out by Sheikh Mohammed bin Maktoum and the United Arab Emirates, who simply wanted to move the large aviation engineering centres at Dublin and Zurich to the Middle East as a if you like, a successor industry when the oil begins to run out. But as a result, of course, so many of our workers lost their jobs, had to retrain, and now are desperately concerned at their pension entitlements. I noticed that in March of this year, the IAS scheme had a maximum funding standard deficit of 769 million, and also that the impact of the 1990 Pensions Act meant that the residual funds available for active and deferred members would only be 5% of the expected benefits. We had a recent controversy, of course, in relation to CEO Muller, and I welcomed the government's position, which followed my own call in relation to the approval of the large pay and bonus package for the Aer Lingus CEO at the time, when the pension fund, of course, continued to be in crisis. But there are very grave concerns at the treatment of the IAS fund in the event of full privatisation. And it has to be asked, Minister, and perhaps you might respond to it in your speech, is it not the case that workers who gave 30 or 40 years service in these semi-states are now being unfairly targeted? Does the current pension fund meet pension regulations standards, and what solution are you now coming forward with to try and protect the fund? I note the recently published report of the expert panel on the resolution of the industrial dispute issues in the IAS. It does make key recommendations, and the expert panel had based those recommendations on the earlier opinions of the Labour Court, and significantly they have recommended increased contributions by both Aer Lingus and the DAA to the IAS pension scheme. And in the case of Aer Lingus, I think the panel has recommended it would put a total of 146.7 million in for active employees. In the case of DAA, it recommends an increased contribution of, I think, 57.3 million, and a further 0.85 million from the DAA to deal with any resolution and wind up of the supplemental ARSSS scheme. But significantly, the panel's report does mention the situation regarding deferred members, and it notes meetings that took place and recommends the companies should amend the manner in which funding for their former staff who are deferred members is to be made available, so as to alleviate much of the impact of the IAS trustee proposal as is possible. But the Minister maintained earlier today that Section 34 was designed to facilitate, in a pragmatic approach, as he called it, the implementation of the expert panel's report. You also said you were going to amend some of the provisions, I think, of Section 34, Minister. But you're continuing, I think, to support your continuous support for new pension scheme provision by DA and SAA, which you say won't, and I quote again, replicate the inflexibilities, so-called inflexibilities of the IASS. So this seems to me and to many of my constituents just reiterating the grave and ongoing concern among deferred pensioners, especially about the future of their pension entitlements and the lack of any impact for them and any consultation with them into any future pension changes, which Section 34 seems to copper fasten. So the question is, Minister, why have you come forward with Section 34? You said it was to facilitate the response of the expert panel, but what it's done, I think, is create huge anxiety and concern about people who have given long and lengthy service to our airline industry in Dublin and who now feel desperately threatened. So I think you should withdraw Section 34, and in failure to do this, I think, means that the bill has to be opposed, despite the positive aspects of this bill for Shannon Airport and indeed for other aspects of our aviation administration. So I'd ask you to rethink it, Minister, and perhaps to come back in your response to indicate clearly how the kind of mess that now exists in this area can be cleared up, and you're the responsible Minister. Thanks, Carla.